Who is next under the Tudorscope? Round 1, vote 5. Hello, I'm HG Tudor. We've had our 4th round of voting. The choices were Eminem, Henry Cavill, Robert Downey Jr., Elon Musk, and President Zelensky. As at the close of voting earlier today, Henry Cavill brought up the rear with 7% of the vote. Next was Robert Downey Jr. with 8%. Then Eminem with 10%. Throughout the voting, there's been a two-way slug, in effect, between Elon Musk and President Zelensky. Elon Musk finished with 34%, Zelensky out in front at 41%. Accordingly, our 4th individual to go through to round 2 is Vladimir Zelensky, President of Ukraine. With that all organised, we move on to our 5th and final selections from round 1. So, thinking caps on as you listen to a description of each individual to see if you can guess who they are before voting commences. Here we go. Our first subject, of course, is a matter of mystery because we don't know who it is. Well, I do, you don't. However, more mystery, which surrounds her date of birth. She was listed as being 13 years old in the spring of 1137, suggesting that she was born as late as 1124. However, some chronicles remember a fidelity oath on the occasion of her 14th birthday in 1136. This information, and her known age of 82 at her death, make 1122 the most likely year of her birth. Her parents almost certainly married in 1121. She was the oldest of 3 children. Her father was a duke, and he had a glittering ducal court, was renowned in early 12th century Europe. She's said to have been named for her mother. It then transmoved from the Latin through to an alternative name. There was, however, somebody with the same name as her that was prominent before her and lived a century earlier than our subject. By all accounts, her father ensured that she had the best possible education. She came to learn arithmetic, the constellations, and history. She also learned domestic skills such as household management and the needle arts of embroidery, needlepoint, sewing, spinning, and weaving. She developed skills in conversation, dancing, games such as backgammon, checkers, and chess, playing the harp, and singing. She had a native tongue, which was regional, but she was taught to read and speak Latin, was well versed in music and literature, and schooled in riding, hawking, and hunting. She was extroverted, lively, intelligent, and strong-willed. Her 4-year-old brother and their mother died at the castle of Talmont in the spring of 1130. She then became heir presumptive to her father's domains. Her father's duchy was the largest and richest province, where our subject spent most of her childhood. She had only one other legitimate sibling, a younger sister. Her half-brother was acknowledged by her father as a son, but not as his heir. The notion that she had another half-brother, William, has been discredited. In 1137, the Duke left the duchy to head for Bordeaux, and he took his daughters with him. Upon reaching Bordeaux, he left them in the charge of the Archbishop of Bordeaux, one of his few loyal vassals. The Duke then set out for the shrine of St. James of Compostela in the company of other pilgrims. However, he died on Good Friday of that year. Our subject, aged somewhere between 12 and 15, then became the Duchess and the most eligible heiress in Europe. As these were the days when kidnapping an heiress was seen as a viable option for obtaining a title, her father dictated a will on the very day that bequeathed his domains to her and appointed King Louis VI of France as her guardian. The Duke requested of the king that he take care of both the lands and the Duchess and find her a suitable husband. However, until a husband was found, the king had the legal right to our subjects' lands. The Duke also insisted to his companions that his death be kept a secret until Louis was informed. The men were to journey from St. James of Compostela across the Pyrenees as quickly as possible, to call at Bordeaux to notify the Archbishop, and then to make all speed to Paris to inform the king. The King of France, known as Louis the Fat, was also gravely ill at that time, suffering from a bout of dysentery, from which he appeared unlikely to recover. Yet, despite his impending death, his mind remained clear. His eldest surviving son Louis had originally been destined for monastic life, but had become the heir apparent when the firstborn Philip died in a riding accident. The death of William, one of the king's most powerful vassals, made available the most desirable duchy in France. Whilst presenting a solemn and dignified face to the grieving messengers, Louis exulted when they departed. Rather than act as guardian to the Duchess and duchy, he decided to marry the Duchess to his 17-year-old heir and bring the duchy under the control of the French crown, thereby increasing greatly the power and prominence of France and its ruling family. Within hours, the king had arranged for his son to be married to our subject, with Abbot Suger in charge of the wedding arrangements. This individual became Queen of France from 1137 to 1152 as the wife of King Louis VII, Queen of England from 1154 to 1189 as the wife of King Henry II, and Duchess of Aquitaine in her own right from 1137 until her death in 1204. As the heiress of the House of Poitiers, which controlled much of southwestern France, she was one of the wealthiest and most powerful women in Western Europe during the High Middle Ages. She was a key leading figure in the Second Crusade. She is Eleanor of Aquitaine. She is our first confirmed subject. Our second subject was born in 1975. Both her parents were road constructionists, Gerda and Charles. Her ancestry includes Dutch as well as French and German. Her French forebears were early Huguenots. Her surname is an Aquitaine surname. She grew up on her parents' farm. On the 21st of June 1991, her father, an alcoholic, threatened both her and her mother while drunk, physically attacking her mother and firing a gun at both of them. Her mother retrieved her own handgun, shot back, and killed him. The shooting was legally adjudged to have been self-defense, and her mother faced no charges. She attended a primary school, a period during which she said she was not fitting in. She was frequently unwell with jaundice throughout childhood, and the antibiotics she was administered made her milk teeth rot. They ended up having to be surgically removed, and her teeth didn't grow until she was roughly 10 years old. At 13, she was sent to boarding school and began her studies at the National School of the Arts. She has said about her early life in her home country, "I grew up as an only child in that country, and there was turmoil in my family, but the surroundings were so great. I was usually barefoot in the dirt. No Game Boys, no computers, and we had sanctions, so there were no concerts. This means you had to entertain yourself." Our subject speaks 2 languages. Although seeing herself as a dancer, she won a 1-year modelling contract at a local competition and moved with her mother to Milan. She spent a year modelling throughout Europe and then moved to the United States to live in both New York City and Miami. She attended the Joffrey Ballet School, where she trained as a ballet dancer until a knee injury closed this career path. She recalled, "I went to New York for 3 days to model, and then I spent a winter in New York in a friend's windowless basement apartment. I was broke. I was taking class at the Joffrey Ballet and my knees gave out. I realized I couldn't dance anymore, and I went into a major depression. My mum came over and said, either you figure out what to do next, or you come home because you can sulk back in our home country." In 1994, she flew to Los Angeles on a one-way ticket her mother bought for her intending to work in the film industry. During the initial months there, she lived in a motel with the $300 budget that her mother had given her. She continued receiving checks from New York and lived from paycheck to paycheck to the point of stealing bread from a basket in a restaurant to survive. One day, she went to a Hollywood Boulevard bank to cash a few checks, including one her mother had sent to help with the rent, but it was rejected because it was out of state and she was not an American citizen. She pleaded with the bank teller until talent agent John Crosby, who was the next customer behind her, cashed it for her and gave her his business card. Crosby introduced our subject to an acting school, and in 1995 she played her first non-speaking role in the horror film Children of the Corn 3: Urban Harvest. Her next film, she played a hit woman in 2 Days in the Valley, but despite the film's mixed reviews, attention drew to her owing to her beauty and the scene where she fought Terry Hatcher's character. Our subject feared being typecast as characters similar to Helga and recalled being asked to repeat her performance in the film during auditions. A lot of people were saying, you should just hit while the iron's hot, but playing the same part over and over doesn't leave you with any longevity, and I knew it was going to be harder for me because of what I looked like to branch out to different kinds of roles. Our subject is an actress and producer. She's one of the world's highest paid actresses. She's the recipient of various accolades, including an Academy Award and a Golden Globe Award. In 2016, Time named her one of the 100 most influential people in the world. She came to prominence in the 1990s by playing the leading lady in the Hollywood films The Devil's Advocate, Mighty Joe Young, and The Cider House Rules. She received critical acclaim for her portrayal of serial killer Aileen Wuornos in Monster, for which she won the Silver Bear and Academy Award for Best Actress, being the first South African to win an acting Oscar. She received another Academy Award nomination for playing a sexually abused woman seeking justice in the drama North Country. She starred in several commercial successful films, such as The Italian Job, Hancock, Snow White and the Huntsman, Prometheus, Mad Max Fury Road, The Fate of the Furious, Atomic Blonde, The Old Guard, F9 and Faster X. She has received praise for playing troubled women in Jason Reitman's comedy dramas Young Adult and Tully, and for portraying Megyn Kelly in the biographical drama Bombshell, receiving a third Academy Award for that role. She has been honoured with a Motion Picture Star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. She is Charlize Theron. Our third subject was born in 1931. He is of English, Irish and Scottish ancestry. His father was a war correspondent and later a regional newspaper magnate, owning 2 newspapers and a radio station. Our subject had 3 sisters. His Scottish-born paternal grandfather was a Presbyterian minister. Later in life, our subject chose to go by his second name, the first name of his maternal grandfather. He attended grammar school where he was co-editor of the school's official journal, The Courier, and editor of the student journal, If Revived. He took his school's cricket team to the national junior finals. He worked part-time at a newspaper and was groomed by his father to take over the family business. He studied philosophy, politics and economics at Worcester College in Oxford, in England, where he kept a bust of Lenin in his rooms, and became known as Red and his first name. He was a member of the Oxford University Labour Party, stood for Secretary of the Labour Club, and managed Oxford Student Publications Limited. After his father's death from cancer in 1952, his mother did charity work as life governor of the Royal Women's Hospital and established a children's research institute. At the age of 102, his mother had 74 descendants. Our subject then began working as a sub-editor with the Daily Express for 2 years. Following his father's death when he was 21, our subject returned from Oxford to take charge of what was left of the family business. After liquidation of his father's stake in the newspaper to pay taxes, what was left was a company which had been established in 1923. He turned its newspaper, The News, its main asset, into a major success. He then began to direct his attention to acquisition and expansion, buying a troubled newspaper, The Sunday Times, and over the next few years acquiring suburban and provincial newspapers, which included the Daily Mirror, The Economist describes him as inventing the modern tabloid, as he developed a pattern for his newspapers, increasing sports and scandal coverage and adopting eye-catching headlines. His first foray outside his native country involved the purchase of a controlling interest in another country's daily, The Dominion. In 1964, while touring a country with friends in a rented Morris Minor after sailing across the sea to that country, he read of a takeover bid for a newspaper by the British-based Canadian newspaper magnate Lord Thomson of Fleet. On the spur of the moment, he launched a counter-bid. A four-way battle for control ensued, in which he was ultimately successful. Later, he launched his country's first national daily newspaper, which was based first in Canberra and later in Sydney. He then acquired the Sydney morning tabloid, the Daily Telegraph, from Australian media mogul Sir Frank Packer, who later regretted selling it to him. In 1984, our subject was appointed Companion of the Order of Australia for services to publishing. After the Keating government relaxed media ownership laws, in 1986 our subject launched a takeover bid for the Herald and Weekly Times, which was the largest newspaper publisher in Australia. In 1999, he significantly expanded his music holdings in Australia by acquiring a controlling share in a leading Australian independent label, Mushroom Records. He merged that with Festival Records, and the result was Festival Mushroom Records. He is a business magnate, media proprietor and investor. Through his company News Corp, he is the owner of hundreds of local, national and international publishing outlets around the world, including in the United Kingdom, The Sun and The Times, in Australia, The Daily Telegraph, Herald, Sun and The Australian, in the United States, The Wall Street Journal and The New York Post. Bug publisher HarperCollins and the television broadcasting channels Sky News Australia and Fox News through the Fox Corporation. He was also the owner of Sky until 2018, 21st Century Fox until 2019, and the now defunct News of the World. With a net worth of US $21.7 billion as at March 2022, he's the 31st richest person in the United States and the 71st richest in the world, according to Forbes magazine. He has been married 4 times. He is Rupert Murdoch. Our fourth subject was born to Kathleen, a homemaker, and Percy, a musician and accountant. He was raised a Roman Catholic and has 3 older siblings. His mother was of French, Irish, and Scottish descent, and his father was of French-Canadian ancestry. Aged 8, he discovered a talent for doing impressions. Aged 10, he wrote a letter to Carol Burnett of The Carol Burnett Show, pointing out that he was already a master of impressions and that he should be considered for a role on the show. He was overjoyed when he received a form letter reply. A fan of Monty Python, whose TV show Monty Python's Flying Circus aired in the 1970s, and the individual appeared on Monty Python's Best Bits and recorded the effect on him of Ernest Scribbler laughing himself to death in the funniest joke in the world. He spent his early years attending a Catholic elementary school. His family later moved where they would spend 8 years in Ontario. He attended high school whilst there, but sometime later his family became homeless and lived together in a Volkswagen van, while he and his brother spent months living in a tent in Charles Daly Park. The family struggled financially. However, their situation started improving once his father found employment in the accounting department at the Titan Wheels tyre factory. Furthermore, in return for living in the house across the road from the factory, the family would work as janitors and security guards at the tyre factory, doing 8-hour shifts from 6 p.m. into the next morning. As a teenager, our subject started attending the Agincourt Collegiate Institute before dropping out of school on his 16th birthday. He then began to perform comedy in downtown Toronto while continuing to work at the factory. He first did stand-up comedy experience in 1977 at the age of 15 with his father trying to help him put together a stage act, driving him to downtown Toronto to perform at the recently opened Yuck Yucks Comedy Club, operating 1 night a week out of a community centre. With more domestic stability, he returned to the stage in 1979 with a more polished act that led to his first paid gig, a 20-minute spot at the Hayloft Club on Highway 48 for a reported $20 compensation on a bill with the mother of pearl performer from The Pig and Whistle. Parallel to his increasing popularity as an impressionist stand-up comic, he tried to break into sketch comedy, auditioning to be a cast member for the 1980-81 season of NBC's Saturday Night Live. He wasn't selected by the show's new executive producer, who picked Charles Rocket instead. Decades later, after establishing himself as a Hollywood film star, he would host the show in May 1996, January 2011, and October 2014. After not getting the Saturday Night Live job, he took a voice acting job performing Clutch Cargo-inspired bits on the All Night Show, an overnight program aired locally on the CFMT TV channel. He continued to perform his stand-up act of contortionist impressions, and then, as a 19-year-old, he was booked at the opening act for the rock band Godot at the Roxy Theatre in Barry for 2 shows on consecutive nights. The rock crowd booed him off stage, and he refused to return for the second night. He continued through performing in terms of impressions and comedy, and then in early 1983 he decided to move to Hollywood, where he began regularly performing at the Comedy Store. Getting on The Tonight Show became his immediate career goal, and by spring 1983 he appeared to have achieved it after getting booked for a stand-up set on the highly rated Late Night Show. However, a lukewarm club set at the Improv got him unbooked. Struggling to replicate his success in Los Angeles, he continued being a big hit in his hometown Toronto, where he returned during late April 1983. While in town, CTV's flagship newspaper program, W5, did a feature on our subject that aired nationally in Canada. Back in Los Angeles, he landed the main role on The Duck Factory, a sitcom being developed for NBC, and in late November 1983, still got to debut his impressionist act on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson via a promotional appearance for the sitcom about to start airing nationally in the United States on the same network. He was noticed doing stand-up by producer Samuel Goldwyn Jr. and contracted to audition for a teen horror sex comedy being developed by the Samuel Goldwyn Company. He landed a starring role in Once Bitten, shot in early 1985. He would continue getting film roles throughout late summer and fall 1985. He shot a supporting part in Francis Ford Coppola's Peggy Sue Got Married, which went into a long post-production process. In parallel, he decided to try it for Saturday Night Live again, this time ahead of the show's 1985-86 season. He was rejected again, reportedly never even getting the chance to audition his material. Unlike his previous SNL rejection, our subject now had a bit of a film career to fall back on, in addition to his impressionist stand-up act. He went back on the comedy club circuit, and then he sensed that doing only impressions was turning into a career dead end, so he set out to develop a new live comedy act. Much to the dismay of comedy club owners booking him, he began abandoning trademark celebrity impressions, opting instead of adding observational character humour to his comedic repertoire, a process that often involved forcing himself to improvise and scramble in front of dissatisfied live audiences that came to see him do impressions. Thereafter came his rise to fame, and he played the lead role in Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, which was released in February 1994, and then his next film, which probably brought him to major prominence, in The Mask. He is a Canadian and American actor, known for his energetic slapstick performances. He broke out as a star in Ace Ventura, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber, followed up with Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls, Batman Forever, and Liar, Liar. Although largely typecast as a comedic actor, he has had success in dramatic roles. His first dramatic success was starring in the Emmy-nominated made-for-television film Doing Time on Maple Drive. He gained attention for his leading roles in The Truman Show, Man on the Moon, earning Golden Globe Awards for each film. He later starred in the psychological science fiction romantic drama Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. This performance is repeatedly lauded as seminal in his career, and for which he was nominated for both the BAFTA Award for Best Actor in a Leading Role and another Golden Globe Award. He is the actor Jim Carrey. Our fifth and final nominee for the Tudorscope was born in the United Kingdom. His parents met in Scotland when serving in the Royal Navy during World War II. His mother was a Wren and a member of the Women's Royal Naval Service. She was of Jewish origin. He referred to his father as the commander. His father was deployed on HMS Jamaica, which took part in the sinking of the German battleship Scharnhorst in the Battle of the North Cape on the 26th of December 1943. He paid tribute to his father's contribution to the war. Sending a Nazi convoy raider to the bottom is a better day's work than any I have ever done. His father's naval career required the family to move from base to base throughout Britain and its colonies, including to Malta, where his brother was born. His father, Eric, later worked as a bookkeeper for boat builders, speedboat manufacturers, and at a prep school. Our subject attended two independent schools, one in Devon and one in Cambridge. He was admitted to Balliol College in Oxford in 1967, where he read philosophy, politics, and economics. He graduated in 1970 with a third-class degree. He joined the political left in the 1960s, drawn by disagreement over the Vietnam War, nuclear weapons, racism, and oligarchy, including that of the uncountable corporation. He expressed affinity with the politically charged counterculture and protest movements of the 1960s and 70s. He avoided the recreational drug use of the time, saying in my cohort we were slightly anti-hedonistic. It made it very much easier for police provocation to occur, because the planting of drugs was something that happened to almost everyone I knew. Our subject was inspired to become a journalist after reading a piece by James Cameron. Our subject was bisexual during his younger days and joked that at his age, his appearance declined to the point where only women would go to bed with him. He said he had sexual relations with two male students at Oxford who would later become Tory ministers during the premiership of Margaret Thatcher, although he would not reveal their names publicly. He joined the Labour Party in 1965, but along with the majority of the Labour Students' Organisation was expelled in 1967 because of what he called Prime Minister Harold Wilson's contemptuous support for the war in Vietnam. Under the influence of Peter Sedgwick, who translated the writings of Russian revolutionary and sovereign dissident Victor Serge, our subject forged an ideological interest in Trotskyism and anti-Stalinist socialism. Early in his career, he began working as a correspondent for the magazine International Socialism, published by the International Socialists, the forerunner of today's British Socialist Workers' Party. This group was broadly Trotskyist, but differed from the more orthodox Trotskyist groups in its refusal to defend communist states as workers' states. In 1971, after spending a year travelling the United States on a scholarship, he went to work at the Times Higher Education Supplement, where he served as a social science correspondent. He was fired after 6 months in the job. Next, he was a researcher for ITV's Weekend World. In 1973, he went to work for the New Statesman, where his colleagues included the authors Martin Amis, whom he'd briefly met at Oxford, as well as Julian Barnes and James Fenton, with whom he shared a house in Oxford. Amos described our subject at the time as handsome, festive, and gauntly left-wing. Around that time, the Friday lunches began, which were attended by writers including Clive James, Ian McEwan, Kingsley Amos, Terence Kilmartin, Robert Conquest, Al Alvarez, Peter Porter, Russell Davies, and Mark Boxer. In November 1973, while in Greece, our subject reported on the constitutional crisis of the military junta. It became his first leading article for the New Statesman. Our subject went to the United States in 1981 as part of an editor exchange program between the New Statesman and The Nation. He became a contributing editor of Vanity Fair in 1992. There's speculation that our subject was the inspiration for Tom Wolfe's character, Peter Fallow, in the 1987 novel The Bonfire of the Vanities. His father died from cancer of the esophagus in 1987, the same disease that would later go on to claim his own life. In April 2007, our subject became a US citizen. He later stated that he saw himself as an Anglo-American. He is an author and journalist who is widely regarded as one of the most influential atheists of the 20th and 21st centuries. He's the author of 18 books on faith, culture, politics, and literature. His political views evolved greatly throughout his life. Originally describing himself as a democratic socialist, he became critical of aspects of American foreign policy, including its involvement in Vietnam, Chile, and East Timor. However, he also supported the United States in the Kosovo War. He emphasized the centrality of the American Revolution and Constitution to his political philosophy. He held complex views on abortion, being ethically opposed to it in most instances and believing that a fetus was entitled to personhood, while holding ambiguous, changing views on its legality. He allegedly supported gun rights and supported same-sex marriage, while opposing the war on drugs. Beginning in the 1990s, and particularly after 9/11, his politics were widely viewed as drifting to the right, but he objected to being called a conservative. During the 2000s, he argued for the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan, endorsed the re-election campaign of George W. Bush in 2004, and viewed Islamism as a principal threat to the Western world. He described himself as an anti-theist and saw all religions as false, harmful, and authoritarian. He argued for free expression, scientific discovery, and the separation of church and state, arguing that they were superior to religion as an ethical code conduct for human civilization. The dictum, "what can be asserted without evidence can also be dismissed without evidence," has become known as his name Razor. He is, of course, the behemoth that was Christopher Hitchens. There are our 5. Eleanor of Aquitaine, Charlize Theron, Rupert Murdoch, Jim Carrey, and Christopher Hitchens. You can vote by going to the community section of this channel, casting your vote to add the 5th person to our existing nominees to go through to the second round. Now, over to you.